Hey everyone, Cleo here, and today I am doing the mid-year freakout tag. Now, there are a few things that I have to say about. First off, this is not a freakout. I am not freaking out over this being the middle of the year at all. Freakout is also a term that is a little bit loaded because of its history of being used to condemn people with mental health issues. And then thirdly, for me, this does not feel like middle of the year. For me, this basically feels as if a new year has started, and that is all to do because of Project Zero TBR. Now, I'm not going to talk about Project Zero TBR within this video. I might mention it, but I'm not going to give you any sort of concluding thoughts. But because all of my year so far has been zoned in on trying to complete this project by the 1st of July, to me it very much feels now like, okay, I've done that, I've concluded that, so now let the year begin, basically. Now this video is a tag video. I will have the original creator of this video in the description box down below. It is a video that I do every year and a video that most people on Booktube do every year. Question number 1 is, what is your favorite book of the year so far? Now, I haven't had a great many books to choose from this year because of Project Zero TBR, but that didn't change the fact that there are some great books to choose from for this question. And definitely there are a few that I believe have the potential to land on my best books of the year list at the end of the year. I might also do a video in which I talk about the 10 best books of the year so far, but for this one I'm just going to mention the one, and I will be deciding to choose And the Mountains Echoed by Khaled Hosseini as my favorite one. Khaled Hosseini is an Afghan writer, most well known for his book The Kite Runner, which is the one that I still have to read by him, but I definitely wholeheartedly recommend And the Mountains Echoed as well. So this is a story that has multiple POV, but in the sense that every single chapter within this book is told from a different perspective. So no perspective is revisited, you always get a fresh perspective. However, some characters that you have been introduced to will definitely be popping in across different perspectives. But it is a very interesting literary device, a very interesting way to structure your story. We start our story off with this sort of central family to this story. We have a father and his 2 children, and these 2 children, a boy and a girl, are very close to one another. They are basically like 2 peas in a pod. They're extremely close. And this boy especially is very caring, very nurturing of his sister. And basically something happens in the first 2 chapters or something, and you kind of want to see what happens next. And that is where the literary device can kind of become difficult for some readers, because we do not get to see what happens next immediately, because we move on to a different perspective, a perspective and a story that is a little bit more removed from this central family that we've been following. But through each and every one of the perspectives, we do get some sort of a link to this original family, and throughout the entire novel we will be getting the full story. What I also liked about this one is that there were multiple disabled characters, so as a disabled reader that just sparks my interest more potentially, and there were multiple cases here. So I didn't always like the way that the story unfurled, because some storylines definitely align more with sort of stereotypical ways in which we view disability, but there's definitely one particular perspective in which I absolutely enjoyed the disability narrative, and especially enjoyed the conversations surrounding disability and acceptance of disability. There are multiple versions of this tag, I feel like, but in the one that I'm following, the second question is the best sequel of the year so far. And I gotta say that I read 2 sequels this year so far, so this is a bit of a difficult question to that extent, but not really, because the answer is definitely going to be Discord of Gods by Jen Lyons, the final book in A Course of Dragons. This is one of the 2 books for which I broke my buying ban, and the second book is a book that I needed to read for another commitment, so that I was like, okay, I might as well physically buy it then. But otherwise I could have waited with that one. Whereas with Discord of God, it was a case of no, I am not waiting. I am reading this book the moment it comes out. I have reread the first 4 books in the series as well this year, sacrificing precious time for my Zero TBR project, because no way was I waiting. So Discord of God did not disappoint. I actually want to reread it already to kind of get, when I first read it, I read it so quickly that I feel like there are so many details or so many intricacies that I've already forgotten. So I kind of want to reread it for that reason. But so Discord of Gods is the final book in the Chorus of Dragons, which is an epic high fantasy series with a lot of LGBTQIA+ representation within it. It is a very much a fast-paced story. It's very much a plot-heavy story. And one of the main selling points for me for this series is its structure. So it's got an intricate structure of many layers, which is also always something that I find very intriguing. The book in itself is basically a book within this world as well. And so you're starting off with an introduction in which you're introduced to the different layers of the story. So in the story, we will have two narrators who are alternating their narratives, and each narrative will take place at a different point in time. In between chapters, we will then have our narrators talking to one another and giving commentary on the story that they have just told. It is a complex story. The structure does not help with the complexity, of course, but as you get further and further along in the series, then definitely things start to make more sense. You start to connect the dots that at first you're like, what? I cannot follow. If you are able to be confused and let yourself be confused, knowing that things will fall into place eventually, then I think that this could be a great series for you. It is very much more plot-driven than character-driven, but for me as a character-driven reader, this actually did not pose a big problem for me within the series, because I just loved the characters so much. I didn't need a whole lot of character exploration in order to fall in love with these characters, and there are just very interesting and important conversations taking place throughout the series, as well as very interesting work being done on the cultural level. For example, very interesting stuff as well when it comes to exploring the boundaries of gender. So yeah, absolutely recommend this one if you haven't read it yet. Next up, we have a new release that you've been dying to get your hands on, but that you haven't been able to read yet. Now, that's the case for a whole lot of new releases because of Project Zero TBR. I have made a video about my anticipated releases for 2022, in which I talk in part I talk about all of those releases that I missed, and so I will have that one linked up above. Here I will mainly mention Kaikei, just because I have seen so much buzz for that book at a certain period in time around its release date, and if I did not have Project Zero TBR, I definitely would have picked it up at that point in time. Kaikei is an Indian-inspired fantasy. It is a myth retelling. It is a retelling of the Ramayana, in which Kaikei is a character. So Kaikei is a sort of princess, I believe, who is disgruntled with the way in which people around her control her life, control the life of the women around her, and so she starts to explore a sort of long lost magic in order to change things. I've heard really great things about it. It is, as far as I'm aware, a standalone fantasy as well, so if you've been looking for more of those, then definitely go and check this one out. Next up, we have my most anticipated release for the second half of the year. Answer to that is The First Binding by R.R. Virdi, another Indian-inspired fantasy. This one is going to be Silk Road fantasy is described as. So basically it's going to be a long ass series. I think he sold the right for 3, but he's hoping to have way more than just that. It is marketed as being like the Kingkiller Chronicles, I think because of the literary device which is being used, which is story within a story. But you know, stories within stories are used a whole lot, so we shouldn't all compare them to Kingkiller Chronicle all of the time. In any case, we are following a traveling bard as he makes his way across the Silk Roads, I'm going to imagine. I am very much intrigued about this one. You know, Asian fantasy, yes. Literary device, story within a story, yes, absolutely. Following a bard and having a magic system that is inspired by language, yes. Next up, we have most disappointing. I will insert what I said earlier. Now, I have definitely been DNFing quite a lot this year. I think just because for the majority, I was reading books that have been kept on my shelves for such a long time, and so I was more ruthless with them. If I wasn't enjoying, I would just be like, you know what, I have kept these books on my shelves for such a long time, I was never intrigued to read them, and now that I am finally picking them up, I find myself not enjoying them. I do not have the time for this let them go. And so I have DNFs quite a lot, but for my biggest disappointments, I'm probably going to choose a book that in the end I gave a 4-star read, which 4-star rating, which is The Green Bone Saga by Fonda Lee, just because I was expecting to absolutely love it, to be completely blown away by it. And as you will have noticed from this rating, I definitely still enjoyed my time with it. I definitely still thought it was very good, very solid. Great even, but I missed the emotional connection, and the emotional connection is very important to me. And so in the end I was disappointed. I was disappointed that I didn't have my heart crushed the way that I expected to going into it. So that is probably my biggest disappointment. I had built this one up so much in my mind. But so yeah, for those reasons, it is going to be my answer for most disappointing. But it's definitely quite high in my ranking of what I've read so far this year. And there are definitely a whole ton more books that I gave way lower ratings than that one. Next we have my most surprising read. I guess I'm going to give most surprising to Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid, just because I was not expecting to love it that much, you know. I knew that a whole lot of people have read it and loved it, and so I was kind of thinking like, okay, it's going to be a really good general fiction type of work, but I hadn't expected to love it that much and be engrossed and engaged with the story that much. It really was like a page turner for me from page 1 until like the last page of the book, you know. It was more as if I was reading, I don't know, a light romance or so in that sense, because I just couldn't put it down. And whenever I put it down, I was like looking forward to picking it back up. So it really took me almost no time to finish this book because I was so engaged and so taken by this story. And it does not happen very often for me that I have really that experience where things are moving along so quickly and so easily that I don't have to kind of struggle with my own focusing powers, because I don't really have focusing powers. And so usually I kind of have to constantly bring my focus back, and with this one that definitely was not a problem at all. So in Such a Fun Age, we are looking at the relationship between a white woman and her black nanny, Amira. And so it is looking at the results of one event at the very onset of the story. So Amira at one point is asked to take the daughter of this white woman to kind of leave the house for a minute so that she doesn't have to deal with the circumstance that's going on. Amira takes this young girl to the grocery store because there's not much open at that time of day. And when they're there, they're basically she's accused of having kidnapped this child at one point. So this book starts off with that event. It's not like it starts off this sort of like wild adventure or anything like that, but it definitely stays in the background. You know, this definitely has an emotional impact on Amira herself, but it also has an impact on the white woman whose child she was taking care of, because all of a sudden she feels like she needs to create this bond with Amira, a bond that up until that point she had not felt she needed to create, even though this is a woman that has been taking care of her child multiple times a week, multiple hours a week for God knows how long. She has up until that point not felt like there needed to be a human connection, yet all of a sudden, because of this event, she starts to feel like there needs to be a bond between them and like they need to become friends. And so it is exploring that sort of dynamic and the way in which race plays a part in that dynamic and into the motivations of this white woman. And so it is kind of questioning the sincerity. I mean, it's definitely questioning the sincerity of these actions. We as a reader can kind of see the hollowness and the shallowness of her reasoning. And she, however, seems to be kind of stuck in this spiral of wanting to make this thing happen and not realizing that she might not have the best motivations, and therefore also spiraling out of control as things aren't going the way that she intends to have them go. So it's a very interesting read, very exciting one as well, and so I would highly recommend you guys to check it out. Next up we have favorite new author. I don't think that I could say that I have any sort of like favorite new author, because for the most part I read books by authors that I haven't read yet, for example. I will say that like one author that has solidified his position in my reading life is Kazuo Ishiguro. He's not like a favorite author, but I have enjoyed all of his work. So I very much loved Never Let Me Go, which is the first book by him that I read. And then I have enjoyed Clara and the Sun, which I read last year. And I once again very much enjoyed An Artist of the Floating World, which is what I read this year. And so he has solidified himself in my mind as an author that I am eager to read more of. It's not a new favorite author, but it's definitely one that, you know, continues to show me that he's worth it. The real answer to this would probably be Khaled Hosseini, but I already talked about him. But so I only have one of his major works still to read. The two other ones have been 5-star reads. New fictional crush. I do not crush, not in real life and definitely not in fiction. I don't even think that there's like a character that I can think of as, you know, rooting for this romance because of that character being such a great love interest, for example. I don't have any memory of that. Probably there is somebody who would qualify, but yeah, that's not really how I read. New favorite character? Yeah, I guess my answer can be Bree from On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. Angie Thomas just does really great character work. Her characters always shine and they're always like really fleshed out real people of many different dimensions. And so Bree is a type of character who I find really interesting. She kind of reminded me of Spencer in Brandon Sanderson's work, in the sense that she has like a mouth that's bigger than, you know, her heart basically. She's somebody who knows what to come back with. She verbally knows how to answer people, but you know, her mouth might get her into trouble from time to time. And in On the Come Up, we're basically following Bree as she's trying to make a career as a rapper happen. However, her mother, who's a single mom, does want more for her. She wants a more secure future, so she kind of wants her to put the rapper dream aside, especially since her father, who was a rapper, was killed because of that, because of working in that environment. And she wants Bree to just focus on her academics and just leave rapping aside. However, for Bree, it is such a big part of her passion of how she processes the world around her that she definitely wants to pursue this career, and she wants to pursue it now because of a big win she has at the beginning of the book, and it kind of seems like now is her time to break through. If she breaks through, this can also kind of save her family because they are in financial difficulties, and so Bree is also taking on more responsibility within the family than what a typical child would need to, or than what her mother would want her to, because her mother kind of feels like she's a caretaker, she needs to take care, and Bree should not be worrying about these things. But on the other hand, Bree of course understands the reality of their home life and cannot help worrying. Aside from that, there's also difficulties in the relationship with her mother because of her mother's past as a drug addict. So I thought Bree was a very well fleshed out character, one that I couldn't help root for. She's very different from me as a person, but I absolutely loved reading from her perspective and getting to know her and seeing her thrive. Next up, we have a book that made you cry. Now, I don't cry easily with books, and I think And the Mountains Echoed is the only book this year that got me to cry. I could, of course, be wrong about that. In any case, there's not a single book that made me like all out, bawl, have my soul crushed. I want a book like that because it's nice to cry from time to time, but this year And the Mountains Echoed came closest. A book that made me happy would be Such a Fun Age, just because I loved having that experience again. It is something that happens so rarely to me that when it happens, I'm just so happy to have had that sort of like reinvigoration of the idea of, oh yes, I absolutely love reading, which, you know, I do love reading. It doesn't feel like a chore. When it feels like a chore, I DNF a book, but it's very rarely that I have that absolutely sucked in feeling that I had with this one. Most beautiful book should go once again to the Greenbone Saga, just because I have them in a beautiful Illumicrate edition, which is just absolutely stunning. Aside from that, what will I mention? There are a lot of books that I find to have a really gorgeous cover. I love the pastel cover to There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job. I love that cover, for example. Another cover that I absolutely love is the cover for Beijing Coma by Matt Chen. I just think that that is such a mood-setting type of cover. You know, it sets a beautiful melancholy mood that absolutely perfectly fits the content of this book. And then the final question is a book that I still need to read, and I'm going to answer none. There are definitely a whole lot of books that I still want to read, but I'm gonna say that there's not a single book that I need to read, you know. I'm going into this second half of the year with the idea that everything is optional. There are certain things that I've set my mind to doing, but if in the moment itself I just don't feel like it, or I feel like reading other things, then I will hopefully absolutely allow myself to do that. The things that I would love to do is I would love to take part in the Howling Pack book club, which is a book club hosted by Sasha from the Wild Sasha, and I would love to take part in Of Queens, Witches and Valkyries book club, which is a book club hosted by Sarah from Voyage in Worlds. So those are the two book clubs that I'm intending to stick with, to stay on track with. But as I said, if at any point that becomes overwhelming, or I just don't feel like picking up the book that they choose that particular month, then I will hopefully just say, you know what, maybe next month. So yeah, that is it for the mid-year freakout tag. As indicated, I am not freaking out. I'm actually super excited about the second half of the year coming around. The second half of the year starts with my birthday. My birthday is the 1st of July, so I'm always just eager for the second half of the year to come around, especially since my favorite months in the year are definitely the months starting from September onwards, and my favorite day of the year is Christmas. So we are entering my favorite half of the year, so I'm not freaking out. I'm just super thrilled. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!